Hello friends! The season is truly starting to change. I was walking this morning and saw so many crunchy brown and yellow leaves scattered all over the ground. So what that means, it is absolutely 100% becoming autumn. And one of the things I look forward to the most with any season is all of the books that come with that particular time of year. I myself am so very much a seasonal reader. I love matching what I'm reading to the season that we're in, and autumn is my most favourite time of year for reading, purely because it's just so cozy. It's the perfect weather to want to just curl up and read, whether that's inside on a rainy day or outside with a nice warm jumper and scarf in the park on a sunny day. So today I thought I would share with you a few book recommendations for autumn, and we've got a few different categories. So I recently watched Morgan Long's video where she went through all of her book recommendations for the autumn time, and she went for categorizing them into clothing types. Whereas for me, I've gone ahead and categorized them into my favorite hot cozy drinks. So I have 4 different categories to talk through today, and we're just going to go through and talk about some of the books that I think you should be reading if you haven't read them already in the next few months. So without further ado, let's get into our first category, which is caramel latte. And these are cozy, uplifting, more adventure and fantasy themed reads. They are feel-good reads and escapist reads, ones that just make you feel warm and cozy and like you've escaped to a different world. So first on my list for this category is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is a book that went pretty viral a couple of years ago, and I think for good reason. This is a high fantasy, low stakes book, and we follow a retired assassin or bounty hunter who is an orc called Viv, who trades that life in because she wants to open her own coffee shop. Coffee is a foreign concept to this sleepy village that she ends up in, and so it's her going through the trials and tribulations of just attempting to open a sweet little cafe and all of the wonderful people that she meets along the way. Woven through this story is a little bit of adventure, a little bit of a problem that needs to be solved by her and her new crew, and it's just a really, really cozy, feel-good fantasy read. I will warn you in advance that you will absolutely want to be eating baked goods throughout this. The way that Travis Baldree describes food and all of the baked goods just makes them sound so incredibly delicious. So that's your heads up to make sure you have sweet treats on hand when reading this book. The next book I've already mentioned in the last couple of my videos, and I think is very well suited to this early autumn season that we find ourselves in now. And that, of course, is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I don't think I need to explain much about this book, but if you're looking for fantasy, if you're looking for an adventure, if you're looking for a cozy adventure, I don't think you can get much better than The Hobbit. It's pretty short, it's pretty sweet, and there's enough going on to keep it interesting, but it does have this sort of slightly cottagecore, cozy undertone, and I absolutely wish I could visit the Shire. Next on my list is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is a Regency-inspired fairy tale and is just absolutely so heartwarming and fun. I'd probably describe it more as YA rather than adult fiction, but that doesn't mean it's any less beautiful or enjoyable. It's such a whimsical story, but it also has such a lot of heart. We follow Theodora, or Dora, who as a child was cursed by a fairy, and so doesn't behave quite how normal young ladies would be expected to behave in this Regency era. And as she goes down to London to help her cousin, she ends up meeting the Lord Sorcier, also known as Elias Wilder, and the two of them, though they seem to take an instant dislike to each other, end up teaming up together to try and solve a magical problem, a magical illness that is harming children in society. This is a historical fantasy, so whimsical, so charming and so light-hearted. Just a nice, short, easy read that I would love to be able to read for the first time again with a hot drink under a blanket on a rainy day. In a similar vein of very cozy feel-good reads, we have The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. Although I read this last year around Christmas time, and again would highly recommend it for that time of year, I think if you're really on the hunt for something super cozy and feel good, this is the perfect time of year to read it, especially around Halloween. If you're someone that enjoys witchiness and magic, but not really the spookiness that comes with a lot of magic-based books, this is such a gorgeous read. It's all about found family, it's about the magic of every day and of family and of love, and it is honestly one of my favourite books that I read last year, and I think I will probably try and reread it again this coming year. And then last on my list is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier, which I think is at the forefront of my mind because I've just finished the third book in this series. The Daughter of the Forest is the first in the Seven Waters trilogy and follows our protagonist Saoirse, who has to go through this incredible trial to try and save her brothers, who have been cursed by the woman that their father has married and has turned basically all of these brothers into swans, and it's up to her, without the use of her voice, to undo this curse. This book can get pretty dark at times. It has some somewhat triggering instances that happen to do with violence and assault, so those are things to keep in mind. But in terms of the actual setting and how beautifully Juliette Marillier writes, this is such a lyrical, gorgeous, folktale inspired book, and I think that kind of folk storytelling just lends itself so nicely to the darkening nights. I'm trying to keep this quite succinct, so I'm going to leave it there, although I could go on forever and ever with so many different books. So now we move on to our next category, which is black coffee. These are super atmospheric, dark or spooky books, perfect for really, really gloomy days and nights. I don't tend to read a lot of books in this particular genre, and I would quite like to branch out a little bit more this year. So this is quite a limited list, and please leave your suggestions for books within this category down below as well. But the first book on this list is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which I read last year for the first time and thoroughly enjoyed. It kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time I was reading it. A lot of the story is just about building tension. It builds and it builds and it builds, and you feel so enveloped in this world that the main character is living. This book follows our main protagonist, who is a young girl who has recently married a man who was widowed by his late wife, and the whole book is kind of about her whole life basically being haunted by this previous wife whose name is Rebecca. It's a story about how the housekeeper, how the house itself, how her husband have this kind of view and these expectations based on Rebecca and the person that she was, and this young girl trying to understand her place in this new life, as well as just feeling really overwhelmed and obviously quite spooked out by these happenings, which are teetering on the line between real and imagined and also haunting. And I think that's the key word for this book, is haunting. It's a slow build, but it's absolutely incredible. And if you've already read Rebecca, I would also recommend Daphne du Maurier's book My Cousin Rachel. It has a similar suspenseful storyline and is just so atmospheric. Next on this list I have The Familiars by Stacey Halls, which is an incredible historical fiction novel. This story primarily follows two women. The first is, oh gosh, what's her name? First one we're introduced to, her name is Fleetwood, and she is a noblewoman who is expecting her fourth child but has never been able to bring her other pregnancies to term, and is so at a loss and so determined to be able to make this work. She meets a local midwife called Alice Gray, who is someone working class in the village and who has ties to a family which have a reputation of witchcraft. And this book is set against the backdrop of the Lancashire witch trials taking place, and is a book about how these two women are desperately trying to save each other. Fleetwood's pregnancy can't survive fully without Alice, and Alice can't survive without the intervention of a noblewoman's help. And then last on this list is one which I would recommend reading at the end of autumn, possibly even the very beginning of winter, right on that cusp, and that is The Mercies by Kieran Millward Hargraves, who is one of my all-time favourite authors. This is a story about an island of women that exists after a storm wiped out all the men in their village during a freak storm on a fishing trip. As such, the women have to fend for themselves, they have to take on these more masculine roles when needed, and this then becomes a problem when the church sends out basically a priest to go and talk to these women and to see what's going on. And again, this is a book that deals with the ideas of witchcraft in a more serious sense. This is a story that utilizes witchcraft as a weapon, as a way to subdue women. It's got much more of a historical grounding, but again is absolutely incredible writing. Really, really brutal, this book, I will say that, but incredibly atmospheric writing. The landscapes that are described are just exquisite, and I just think no one could do it better. This is just one of those books that was a hard read at times, but also so full of life and compassion, and yeah, I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. And so the last two books that I've mentioned, if you're looking for more witchy books but more of like a historical, less like fun whimsical spells and more historical grounding and what women have faced over the years, then those two books are so good. Moving into more light-hearted things, our next category is chai tea, which I chose because it rhymes with the main word that I attribute to this category, which is curiosity. Chai tea, curiosity. Not my best work, but it's okay. So the first book in this category is The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben, which essentially is a book all about the hidden life of trees, as you might have guessed. I always feel such a deep connection to nature, and specifically to trees at this time of year when everything is changing all around us. And this is such an incredible book full of really insightful and almost human-like qualities about trees. There's almost a philosophical aspect to it, a more playful aspect to it, and he is just so knowledgeable about what he does. He has worked in forestry for a long time, and I just found it so interesting when I read this. So if you are also interested in the natural world and specifically trees, I think this is a really good book to get some additional insights. The next book I have in the curiosity category is more based on the specific time of year we're in, which is the new year. I always think of this time of year as a new fresh beginning because of the links that I have in the past to a new school year. So if you're anything like me, I always like to take this as an opportunity for a fresh start. And one of the books that I read every single year in January is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. If you're feeling stuck in a rut with creative projects, whether that is photography or drawing or writing or, you know, whatever it might be, this is such an excellent book. It's full of encouragement and wisdom, but it's also got a little bit of tough love and so much insights to gain from it. And if you're a creative person, or if you want to be more creative, I think this is an excellent book to read or to listen to as an audiobook. Going back to the theme of the natural world, the next book in this category I want to talk about is Diary of a Young Naturalist by Dara McNulty. This is such an incredible book. This is a memoir, probably is the best description for it, by a teenager called Dara who experiences the natural world in such a intense and beautiful way. The blurb on the back describes this as evocative, raw and lyrical, which I couldn't agree with more. Following an autistic teenager coping with the uprooting of home, school and his mental health while pursuing his life as a conservationist and environmental activist. And it is just such gorgeous writing in here. This is also set up into seasonal chapters. So we have spring at the beginning and it just works its way through, and it's just such a gorgeous read. And if you're looking for a memoir, or if you're looking for something, just another perspective on the natural world, this is beautiful. In a similar vein of just seeing things from a different perspective, I have How to Be a Good Creature by Cy Montgomery and illustrated by Rebecca Green. And this edition is absolutely stunning. Look at those deckled edges. Look at that gorgeous cover. And this is sort of life lessons that she has learned through, I think it's 13, yeah, a memoir in 13 animals that she has encountered and what they have taught her about sort of being a good person, how to be a good creature. And it's just such a lovely read. The illustrations in this are beautiful as well. Look at the little piggy, one of many adorable illustrations. And I just think it's so important to remind ourselves of what other people or other animals or other plant lives or just things and beings that experience the world differently to us can teach us about life. And then lastly in this section, and this is one that I struggled to know which one to put it in. It could have gone in this one or it could have gone in the category that follows this one. This is The Lost Spells, written by Robert McFarlane and illustrated by Jackie Morris. And this is a poetry collection with the most stunning illustrations. Each poem has the name from nature, whether that is a type of plant, an animal, and I forget what the type of poem is called, where you use the poem spells out the name of the poem. So for example, if the poem was oak, the first line would begin with O, the second line would begin with A, and the third line would begin with K. And it's a celebration really of the natural world. I just feel inspired and like I'm experiencing something otherworldly whenever I read these poems, whenever I look at this book. As I said, the illustrations are just absolutely stunning, and it's one of those books that just makes me so curious about what I'm reading and also so inspired to do more, to find out more, to create more. And it's also just probably the most beautiful book that I own. So this had to make an appearance in this recommendation video. The next and final category today is hot chocolate, which are all the books that are so comforting and nostalgic and connect me to my inner child. So I've got a few to go through with you here. Let's dive right in. So I think it'll come as no surprise that I am including Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. Really don't feel the need to go into too much detail about this because I feel like you all already know it, but it's just one of my favourites. It's so gorgeous, and I also highly recommend the Netflix TV series Anne with an E as well. I have this copy, which I think is just such a beautiful edition. I love the illustrations. But if you've read this and you've not read anything else by L.M. Montgomery, if you want the Anne of Green Gables vibes, but you don't feel like reading Anne of Green Gables again, I read Emily of New Moon by L.M. Montgomery last year, and it was great. Another just really lovable protagonist in a gorgeous world with beautiful writing, beautiful landscape, and a beautiful rendition of the natural world. Such a cozy read, perfect for autumn. Then I have another of my comfort books, which is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. And the best way to read this book is to be in bed or on the sofa, somewhere really cozy and safe, and have a hot drink, maybe a hot chocolate even, and just open this book and read it from beginning to end. It is medicine for when you are feeling a bit down, and it is like a warm hug. It's just so stunning and beautiful, and one of those books that always makes me feel better. So I highly recommend this for a cozy autumn morning spent in bed or cozied up in the evening by candlelight. It's just such a beautiful book. I don't think it's a book recommendation video until I bring out my edition of Mary Oliver's Devotions. This could be any Mary Oliver book. This just happens to be the one that I own. I borrow a lot of the other ones out of the library. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be Mary Oliver, but there's something really, really lovely about having a dedicated book of poems to work your way through, especially when the days start getting shorter and they're such beautiful poems. I recently read Why I Wake Early by Mary Oliver, and this collection includes some of those poems as well. But yeah, I just think you can't beat Mary Oliver when it comes to comforting, beautiful poetry. And yeah, this just happens to be the collection that I always mention because it's the only one of her books that I own. I also want to quickly mention the Comfort book by Matt Haig, which is a series of, I suppose, musings and affirmations, recipes, just everything in between. And I've listened to this as an audiobook a couple of times, but it's called the Comfort book for a reason. It's just full of comforting, lovely words, and you can never go wrong with that. So I think I especially recommend that as something to dip in and out of, and it's also really nice to listen to as an audiobook if you're on your way to work. It just is a little pick-me-up in the mornings. And then lastly, I have The Squirrel and the Lost Treasure by Coralie Bickford Smith, which I am mostly including because I think that the cover and the illustrations are just stunning and so autumnal. I mean, just look at that. Is that not just beautiful? This is a really sweet children's book about a squirrel. It's just such a gorgeous book. One autumn evening, a young squirrel spots an acorn glinting on the forest floor. Eager to protect her treasure from watchful eyes and hungry mouths, she buries it deep in the heart of the forest. But when she returns after the icy winter, her acorn is nowhere to be found. Where could it be? An enchanting fable about growth, new life, and finding hope in unexpected places. And it is just so stunning. Let me do a little show and tell with you right now. I'll just show you some of my favourite pages. The most stunning illustrations. This one is my favourite page. I love it so much. So I would highly recommend this, especially if you have any little ones in your life, or if you're just like me and a total child at heart when it comes to anything to do with squirrels. And I think that that is everything that I want to talk to you about today. There are always so many more books that I wish I could include, but I simply do not have the time to tell you all about them all at once. I would absolutely love to know what you are planning to read over the autumn time, if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, and if you have any recommendations of your own to add to my TBR list. Thank you so much for being here, friends. Take care, and I will see you very soon in another video. Goodbye.